Hello and welcome to Ask EVGA episode 18. Yes, in fact, there is an episode 18. Even though episode 17 came out 3 months ago, we are still doing this series, and I say we a little bit unusually because I've already noticed that Joseph is not joining me for this video. Unfortunately, Joseph will not be in any of the videos going forward. He is still working with us here at EVGA, but he won't be in the video part of things directly. Maybe I can get him to come in a future video as kind of a special guest, but for the time being, you're going to be stuck with me. There were a bunch of questions from the last episode on Ask EVGA 17, but unfortunately, most of those questions are either already answered or don't really have any relevance anymore. If, however, you do still have a question that you would like us to answer, go ahead and put it in the comment section for this video, and I'll get that in a future week of this show. So I went through the comments that we've had on several of our videos leading up to today, just so that we keep everything nice and topical. The first one here is from Rob. He says, looks cool. Did you capture on a second PC or the same? This is in reference to the Shadow of the Tomb Raider video that we uploaded earlier this week. That is actually recorded primarily through a Ninja. Itomo creates a lot of cool video capture products, and one of theirs is the Ninja that we use for a lot of our video capturing. It's really nice because it allows for full HDMI 2.0 support, 4K 60, and HDR. So all of that HDR footage that you see on our YouTube channel, that is courtesy of the Ninja that's actually able to capture that straight from our GTX and RTX graphics cards. So that's really cool, and it's a very useful tool for us. It's also used in the production of all of our mainline videos. That's how I record off of our Sony cameras, as an example. So we can actually do it with that method. Now, if you were doing this yourself and you didn't have such a device, you could use a second PC as a capture device. We do that as well. We have a system there that has a capture card in it, which also supports 4K 60 capture. So there are multiple ways to do that, and on a system, if you have sufficient power and processing power, you can actually record while you are doing the gaming. That's a little bit more difficult, and we're trying to give you guys exact performance metrics, so we don't want to have the capture of the video actually affect the performance of the gameplay, so that you can know, if you were to buy, say, an RTX 2080 Ti, the kind of performance that you would expect to get in the games that we are featuring. So moving on to our next question. This is from SBS9845X, really nice name. Will a PCIe 2.0 fit in a PCI Express 16? This is in regards to the graphics card installation video that we did some time ago. I will say you're kind of conflating two different things here. So there are different generations of the PCI Express standard, from the first generation through to the third generation and the fourth generation that will be coming out in the future. The second generation standard was with us for a long time, and in many ways is still supported. It's one of the nice things about PCI Express is that it is backwards compatible, so different generations will work in the current generation slot. So in reference to your question, if you had a current motherboard that had a 16X slot on it, that would likely be a PCI Express 3.0 generation, and you could use a 2.0 generation card in that slot without any issues. We do it all the time. If we have older graphics cards we're testing for a retro thing, as an example, we'll throw them in a new motherboard and they work without any issues. So to answer your question, yes, if you have a modern motherboard with a 16X slot, almost certainly it'll work with any of your 2.0 devices. If, however, your motherboard is really old and maybe it's got first generation PCI Express, that may not work. But that's all I can really say on that part of it, because I don't really know what motherboard you're using. The next question here is from Torodez23. He says, what? Why am I subbed? I haven't even seen this channel before. It seems like an odd comment to make, because apparently you were subbed to this channel, and it's also worth noting that you put one N in channel and you capitalized it, so that is the correct spelling of Chanel. Moving on. So Aravis has a question here about the HDR color grading. He says, hey guys, do you use some sort of special form of HDR grading? Your Battlefield 5 videos look totally different in HDR compared to how my Battlefield 5 looks on PS4. The way HDR is in your videos is mind-blowing. one of the better implementations that I've seen, but I don't know whether it is because of the Turing's different tone mapping hardware or color HDR grading. Maybe it's due to the Atomo's recording card. The Atomo is making a difference, the Ninja, that is helping us. A lot of the difference that you're seeing is down to how Windows itself handles HDR, which hasn't been great, but it's actually been getting better. The tone mapping is going to be specific per game, and I would not be surprised in the slightest if the tone mapping for Battlefield 5 is different on consoles than it is on PC. That's usually the case. Obviously for the PS4, they're trying to make it so that it will look good on HDR televisions, and a lot of HDR televisions don't necessarily meet an HDR spec. So oftentimes when you're making something for a console that's HDR based, you will do so in a way that is a little bit more forgiving to the settings that you might be running on your TV. Just from personal experience, I almost never see anybody running their TV at correct color settings. It's very rare to see one that's calibrated, whereas with monitors, that type of thing is actually really common, especially if you have a professional monitor or even a high-end gaming monitor can be fully calibrated, and so they can go with much tighter, more aggressive things like tone mapping that'll show differently, even if you're viewing it on that same screen. So say you're watching your YouTube video on a TV that is R capture versus playing it on your PS4, I do expect them to look different, and I'm not surprised the tone mapping is different, but as far as how they're actually doing it in Battlefield 5, I'm not 100% sure. But it is nice to know that the PC, as is often the case, has the best looking implementation of that technology. Moving on here, we have one from Rapid Gaming. This was an interesting one. This was actually off of our ACX 2.0 introductory video, which I forgot that was even on the channel. This was from several years ago, and he asked, is anyone here in 2019? That is this week's featured comment for that video, and as nobody has replied to his comment, I can assume that nobody is here in 2019. Moving on, we have a question here from Bill Smith. This was in regards to, I believe, our our Precision XOC video, where we talked about how to overclock with Precision XOC. He says, I'm a little late here, but could you tell me what the two links of the chain that are right next to the voltage slider? I'll put a graphic here so that you can follow along. When I click it, it changes to a broken chain. What is the function of clicking this? Thank you. On XOC, and it's moved a little bit on Precision X1, but we still use the chain motif. That's kind of why I wanted to address this, because we do still use the chain and unchained to show that something is linked versus unlinked. Essentially, what you're linking in XOC is your temperature target as well as your power target, temp target and power target. Most of the time, it's okay to keep those basically tied together. So if you turn your temperature target, you should also turn up your power target. Most often configurations, you'll probably want to do that anyway. In fact, if you have a card and you're trying to do any amount of overclocking on it, the first thing you'll probably want to do is max out the temperature target and max out the power target, because that's all within the limits that are set, that are safe for that graphics card. So very rarely would you ever need to turn them down for any reason. I know that during the mining craze, people were turning down power target specifically because it didn't really affect their hash rate, and they could have the card consume less power, therefore getting a higher hash rate per wattage when they're doing that. So if you click that and they're no longer linked, then you can move their temperature target and the power target independently. Not really sure of too many scenarios where you would really need to do that. Maybe you want to have your card have full power, but there's a certain temperature you don't want it to go above. You could set your power target all the way up and then lower your temp target. That may be useful on cards like hybrids that run at much lower temperatures anyway, even when the power target is set very high. So we do give you that option, but very rarely do you need to mess with those sliders all that much, other than turning them way up or turning them back to normal. But that is how that works, and that does still work that same way in PX1. Next question here. This is from Bigfoot's Voyage, oddly. I have this, and I haven't seen my fans come on once, except for boot up and down. Do you know what temps will activate the fans? I've never gone above 60 Celsius. This was in reference to the quick look that we did for the RTX 2070 back when that launched, and I believe we unboxed a 2070 Ultra at that time, or an XE Ultra rather. That does sound normal based off of the temperature that you just gave. The fan should kick on when the system turns on. and then very quickly they'll idle down. It just turns the fans off when they don't need to run. A couple reasons why we do that. First of all, it's quieter. Obviously, your system's not running fans that it doesn't need to. Second of all, there's no issues with running the cards at about 60, 65 or lower with the fans off. It doesn't affect the longevity of the components in any way, and actually gives you the benefit that your fan bearings, one of the very few mechanical components in your system, will last much longer because they're not running all the time. So that is normal. Your fans shouldn't be running when they're on idle. There are ways in Precision X1 to turn that up if you want to run your own fan curve where it never idles. And in some cards that have dual or triple BIOS, if you go into an OC BIOS, we'll often disable that feature so that you can always have some mode where the fans are running anytime that the system is on. But what you're seeing with that card, where it's never gone above 60 Celsius, then that's highly normal. Your fans probably shouldn't be running. My advice to you is try some more PC gaming, because if you're doing some intense PC gaming, the temperature should certainly go above 60 and their fans should certainly come on. That's just the way that high-end PC hardware is. Eventually it should need to be cooled actively, but keep on gaming and you should see those fans kick on just fine. The last question here is from William, and this was part of our GTX 1660 Ti unboxing. He says, it's not really a question so much as the most highly rated comment on that video with 17 upvotes, which was, "That is one thick boy." And my hope is that you were referring to our 2.75 slot single fan GTX 1660 Ti and not the host of that video, which was in fact me. But nevertheless, we went to a 2.75 slot design for the single fans on the 1660 Ti, mostly because that is actually a pretty high powered chip. It puts out the same performance, and actually in some cases a little bit higher than a GTX 1070. So to keep that chip cool, and if you look at some of the reviews, it's one of the coolest running, even though it is a single fan card. We've moved to that 2.75 slot. We have heard from some people feedback that it can't fit in their small form factor builds because of the 3 bracket requirement, or 3 slot PCIe bracket requirement. But we do offer a dual fan solution, and that is a dual slot card, and that should fit in just about any build that would fit any full-size card. So most of the even micro ITX, or mini ITX rather, cases these days are capable of fitting about a 10-inch graphics card in them. So definitely take a look at the dual fan card, because that'll work just fine in a system like that. That wraps it up for the questions this week. As ever, leave your questions in the comment section below, and I'll catch that on a future episode of Ask EVGA, and you have a good rest of your day.
All our troubles seems to fade out.